say.
Well, I'm gonna tell you what, man. You know what I'm saying? Like, what we're gonna read this. You know what I'm saying? And like, you can sit here with me and we'll go over this together. What do you think? That work?
That works for me.
All right, cool. You know what I'm saying? This is a bit of a long article. It's in the Times, so it is what it is. You know what I mean? But anyway, right? So here we go. All right, I'll read this. A weird thing happened right after the November 3rd election. Nothing. The nation was braced for chaos. Liberal groups had vowed to take to the streets, planning hundreds of protests across the country. Right-wing militias were girding for a battle. In a poll before Election Day, 75% of Americans voiced concern about violence. Instead, the as was not mass action, but crickets. When media organizations called the race for Joe Biden on November 7th, jubilee broke out instead as the United States to celebrate the democratic process that resulted in Trump's ouster, right? Now, a second odd thing happened amid Trump's attempts to reverse the result. Corporate America turned on him. Hundreds of major business leaders, many of whom had backed Trump's candidacy and supported his policies, called on him to concede. To the president, something felt amiss. It was all very, very strange, Trump said on December 2nd. Within days after the election, we witnessed an orchestrated effort to anoint the winner, even while many key states were still being counted. In a way, Trump was right. There was a conspiracy unfolding behind the scenes, one that both curtailed the protest and coordinated resistance from CEOs. Both surprises were the result of activists and business titans. The pact was formalized in a tense, little notice joint statement in the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and AFL-CIO published on Election Day. Both sides would come to see it as a sort of implicit bargain inspired by the summer's massive, sometimes destructive racial justice protest in which the forces of labor came together with the forces of capital to keep the peace and oppose Trump's assault on democracy. Yo.
This is the New York Times, correct?
Yes, it is.
Oh, I already know they biased as a motherfucker.
Well, it's not just that. You know what I mean? There's more to it than that when it comes down to it, right? You know what I mean? Like, you see this bullshit? The conspiracy was unfolding behind the scenes. Ones that both curtailed the protest and coordinated resistance from CEOs. Both surprises were the result of an informal alliance between left-wing activists and business titans. What did I tell you happened?
Oh, most definitely. Like, there's even like the shit I was involved with. I don't talk too much because you know how this shit works.
Yeah,
it's happening.
I got you.
It's like, do you know how many ops we dealt with? I personally, I could talk about some of the shit that was said to me, and this is from all races, even including a lot of black dudes.
Now, hang on. Wait a minute. Yeah. For those who don't know who you are, because I'll be honest with you, YouTube handed me a strike this week, right? So I can't go on my channel, right? So, like, this shit's going up on Rumble and it's going up on Odyssey. Okay. You know what I mean? Like, I'm going to have to move platforms for at least a week or so until I get my fucking shit back. And then I'll put this back.
Why did YouTube strike you? The propaganda vid?
No, I got popped for the video saying we are all terrorists now because in the very first fucking sentence that I came out of my mouth was America's not a democracy, it's a republic. And that apparently is... You know what I'm saying? Saying that the voter thing was going against what they say about voting.
Tom, how do I? You know how I avoid? I've not gotten a strike for years, right?
Well, like,
I say all my shit in the middle of videos.
I feel where you are, right?
You actually have to watch this shit.
Yeah, I feel you. But you had like the dustiest channel on YouTube though. When it comes down to
hey, listen, it's dusty. It keeps a low profile.
It does.
Shadow ban the motherfucker, so it doesn't really matter.
You know how I am, you know what I mean? Like, my shit is shadow banned as fuck, right? It just, because my message is so proper that, like, they got no choice. Like, I'm at this point, legit, I'm like 10 subs away from 2,500 right now, right?
Only your subs will get, like, in your feed, or I get your stuff pinged because most people like, oh, I don't get their shit. No, you know what it is? Like, I've never clicked on any bells or stuff. It's what you fucking watch. People don't understand how algorithms work, bro. They're stupid.
I feel you. This shit. All right.
Yeah.
This is a long fucking article. The handshake between business and labor was just component of a vast cross-partisan campaign to protect the election dedicated not to winning the vote, but to ensuring it would be free and fair, credible, and uncorrupted. For more than a year, a loosely organized coalition of operatives scrambled to shore up America's institutions as they came under simultaneous attack from a remorseless pandemic and an autocratically inclined president. Though much of this activity took place on the left, it was separate from Biden's campaign and crossed ideological by not. The scenario and the shadow campaigns were desperate to stop not a Trump calamitous that no result could be discerned at all. A failure of the central act of democratic self-government has been a hallmark of America since its founding. Yeah, let me put this way, right? Trump was only dangerous to institutions that had no business being institutions.
Facts.
I put it that way, right? Like legit, like if your institution is garbage and Trump endangered it, it meant that we don't need your institution. That's the fucking problem. At the end of the day, you know what I mean? Like the FBI, the CIA, all these NSA, all this fucking nonsense, the Department of Defense, like all these fucking giant monstrosities, Homeland Security, right? Like, oh, what are we going to do with our Homeland Security? I don't know. Same thing we did before fucking 2003. You know what I mean? Like, it ain't even been around that long. And motherfuckers act like it's some hollowed hall. You know what I mean? Did you see that fucking shit about, what's her name? The press secretary stood here and fucking made a crack about what are we going to do about, they asked her, what are we doing with the Space Force? And she's like, why are you asking me about the Space Force? Right? And they're like, are you disrespecting a branch of our military? Like it's the fucking Marines or something. You know what I'm saying? Like, yo, nobody even knows a single Space Force person.
It's not even, it goes beyond that with her because it's the same thing with Biden and people were just praising this. I'm like, they're just stupid because he doesn't fucking answer questions. He doesn't answer shit, like basic ass questions. That's a basic question. Even if you give a bullshit reason, that's a basic question. You can't fucking answer one. That's how I interpret it anyways.
Yeah,
But even if the FBI, which is pretty much all of them, I say abolish, even if you would say, and I could see benefits, that's one of the few, not all of the corruption in the history. That's one of the few agencies that actually do shit. The rest of them can go to hell, pretty much.
Yo, I agree with you. Right, they're worthless. All right, let's get to this next paragraph because this is important, right? Their work touched every aspect of the election. They got states to change voting systems and laws, helped secure hundreds of millions in public and private funding. They fended off voter suppression lawsuits, recruited armies of poll workers, and got millions of people to vote by mail for the first time. They successfully pressured social media companies to take a harder line against disinformation and use data-driven strategies to fight viral smears. They executed national public awareness campaigns that helped Americans understand how the vote count would unfold over days or weeks, preventing Trump's conspiracy theories and false claims of victory from getting more traction. After Election Day, they monitored every pressure point to ensure that Trump could not overturn the result. The untold story of the election is that thousands of people of both parties who accompanied the triumph of American democracy at its very foundation, says Norm Eisen, a prominent lawyer and former Obama administration official who recruited Republicans and Democrats onto the board of voter protection program. Yo, dude.
It's the establishment protecting itself. Not only that, like the biggest problem to me without this whole thing, and you know my views, but the biggest thing is the fact that the Supreme Court didn't even touch it. They didn't even want the precedent on their heads. That's the biggest part to me. One of your only fucking jobs to do, and you don't even do it. That's damning. That's damning.
Like, I think it's fucking trash that, like, they stood here and, like, they're talking about the fact that they got fucking laws and voting systems implemented in fucking in states that legitimately had, you know what I mean, no real recourse for it. Like, for instance, Pennsylvania stood here and said, like, yeah, like, we're not counting the votes after a certain day. And, like, the people who actually ran the election board in PA said, fuck you, we're going to do what we want, even though, like, PA lawmakers made laws to get rid of this dumb shit. Right?
Exactly.
You know, I mean, they legitimately, like, it's not like they didn't fucking, it's not like they fucking are saying that we didn't steal the election. They're saying, like, yo, legitimately, like, yo, we stood here and changed the fucking turnout of what the fuck happened. Right? But, like, yo, they're just putting it in a goddamn different way. Like it's fucking
And
it's
then
ridiculous.
they just, completely just barred Texas and other states from even bringing up a grievance. But y'all are supposed to expect people to respect a legal system that does this shit. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, like this is what they do. You know, what I mean, they straight just don't give a fuck what the fuck it is you're saying. You know, what I mean, legit. So
Yep.
they're like, oh, we don't care if, you know what I'm saying, you don't want to stand here and think that, you know what I mean, we don't care that you don't like the fact that illegals voted in the election. We don't care about the fact that you have laws against, you know what I mean, voter, what the hell is it? The vote hoarding thing that they did, where like they had a whole bunch of people go out and gather up a whole bunch of ballots and basically turn them in with just Joe Biden's name checked off and no name or signature on them, right? Like they're like, oh, we don't care if you don't want to certify those ballots. We're going to certify them because that's how we want it to be.
200%, Tom. In some counties, 200% of registered votes. Like, like, in the main thing, two things I already knew things were fraudulent from the beginning was number one, there are 150 million American votes. No way in hell. Not even close. I can go numbers wise as to why that is. And number two, you look at the states. You bring up Philly, good old history of corruption. You bring up Detroit with organized crime. Milwaukee's known for corruption. ATL, A-Town's known for corruption. Arizona, not so much. 16. Chi-Town wasn't. I was surprised that Chi-Town was one of them that was in dispute. I was surprised. It's wild that people. But then again, most of them don't study history like you and I do, so they don't know how this shit works.
I feel you. All right, let's. Trump and his allies are running their own campaign to spoil the election. The president spent months insisting that the mail ballots were a Democratic plot and the election will be rigged. His henchmen at the state level sought to block their use, while his lawyers brought dozens of spurious suits to make it more difficult to vote, an intensification of the GOP's legacy of suppressive tactics. Let's be real here, all right? Let me be real here, all right? In any other country, what the Republicans do would just be considered normal. Right? Like, in Canada and Europe and any other place, you have to show ID to vote. Like, it doesn't fucking matter.
This was normal even back in 2012. Even Obama, even the Obama administration agreed. Everybody named Mama agrees with what Trump said. Even Joe Biden's lying ass. Elizabeth Warren, all of them have been concerned since 2000, really my entire life, about voter fraud. This has been a known problem. But then all of a sudden, it's not a problem. Okay.
All right. So before the election, Trump plotted to block a legitimate vote count, and he spent months following November 3rd trying to steal the election he lost with lawsuits and conspiracy theories. Pressure on state and local officials, and finally summoning his army of supporters at a January 6th rally that ended in deadly violence at the Capitol. Let's keep this all the way 100. All right. Okay, like 4 people, there was like 6 people who died. 4 of them died of heart attacks because they were old fucks. All right, let's keep that all the way 100.
Only one lady died, in my view. I mean,
well, no, there was a cop. No, there was a cop who got hit in the head repeatedly with like a fire extinguisher or some shit, right? And I mean, and like, that's bad. You shouldn't be hitting people in the head with fucking fire extinguishers. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I don't know the situation. I'm just gonna put it out there.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, he died afterwards, though. Like, he died at, like, home, you know what I mean? After he was hit with a fire extinguisher repeatedly, right? Like, he collapsed at his house, and that's fine. You know what I mean? I understand, you know what I mean? Like, and that shouldn't happen, but let's be real here. How many people died in all these riots throughout the fucking summer and shit? You know what I mean? Like, how many human beings died at the riots and nobody was like, oh, man, like, they're traitors to America. They're seditious people. We should be, you know what I mean, locking them up in terrorists. Like, there was nobody in fucking Congress calling for that shit.
There's been a lot of people that saying stuff. People have short-term memory loss. Because there was a lot of shit that was said.
How about this, all right? Nobody came out in Congress and said that it was an insurrection to take over the goddamn fucking country.
Because they don't. But man, they just lie. They don't believe half the shit that they say. Most of them, anyways. That's serious. They say with fickle because they pick and choose because they'll come out on one week and condemn something, and the next week they'll like, oh, because it suits me, all this works. Like, let's be honest.
All right, let's go on. The democracy campaigners watch with alarm. Every week we felt like we were in a struggle to pull off this election without the country going through a real dangerous moment of unraveling, says former GOP Representative Zach Wamp, a Trump supporter who helped coordinate a bipartisan election protection council. We can look back and say this thing went pretty well, but it was not at all clear in September and October that was going to be the case. Let's keep this all the way 100. All right, nobody believes that this election was real. All right. No one believes that. Legitimately. Like, there is no one in this country who fucking believes that this election actually happened the way it supposedly happened. Everybody has questions about it. So it's not like, yo, our faith in democracy is restored. Like real shit. Like, everybody feels like, I mean, this is complete and utter bullshit. And I've talked to many people who feel the same exact way that I do.
The biggest thing with me, Tom, it's like this the most covered because there have been disputed elections throughout American history. If people actually study American history, right? The biggest problem to me is that they're so definitive. Oh, these quote unquote. First of all, conspiracies do exist, and conspiracy theory, that term needs to be properly analyzed. But not only that, none of this went to fucking court. So people say, "Oh, Donald Trump, he's just lying." How can you prove that he's lying? What proof do you have that this man is lying? That's my biggest thing. Where's the proof?
I agree. They don't have any
But of
proof.
course they didn't want it to go to court because then everything would have been unveiled. You would have had subpoena power. You would have had all the documents, all the evidence brought to table. None of it went to court.
Yep. All right, let's keep rocking. This is the inside story to conspiracy to say the 2020 election based on access to the group's inner workings. Never before seen documents and interviews with dozens of those involved from across the political spectrum. It is the story of an unprecedented, creative, and determined campaign whose success also reveals how close the nation came to disaster. With every attempt to interfere with the proper outcome of the election was defeated, says Ian Basson, co-founder of Protect Democracy, a nonpartisan rule of law advocacy group. But it's massively important for the country to understand that it didn't happen accidentally. The system didn't work magically. Democracy is not self-executing.
I'm so sick of these groups saying, first of all, I wonder who's backing and how much money. But not only that,
oh, we're gonna get into that. we're gonna get into that.
This democracy, democracy, these buzzwords, it's a republic. It's what it is. But they don't want to do that term because what does republic do? They're representatives. Even in the House of Representatives, people don't understand this, Tom, and what that indicates. Because if you say it's democracy, then I actually feel that my vote counts when not necessarily in a republic.
Well, I mean, this is the problem. This isn't a democracy, and democracies are dumb, and they don't work because people are fucking stupid, and it shouldn't be mob rule. Like, especially
I 100% agree.
Legitimately, all right. So this is the fourth largest country in the world, right?
Yes.
By landmass, like period, point blank. And due to the fact of how large this landmass is, we are I think the fourth largest or third largest
population,
third largest country by population, right? And so in that you literally, like I was watching the video earlier, there's places in this country where it hit -80 in the past 50 years, right?
Yeah.
And then there's places in this country where it hit 150. Right.
I knew at least 130. Yeah, I'm not shocked by 150 because it gets ridiculous. Like maybe in the Mojave Desert, probably.
No, fucking Death Valley, right?
Oh, Death Valley.
Yeah, you got the Appalachian Mountains, you have fucking the Rocky Mountains, you got people who live in the Delta, you have people who live in the fucking southern plantations and the agricultural areas, you have people who live in massive urban areas in the Northeast and the West Coast, right? And these people live in different ways. So you cannot have a mass amount of people in the cities voting on how the agrarian individuals live inside of this country who fucking feed them. This is why this is a republic and it's not a democracy. That's why, because people in the cities are socialist individuals in the country have to take care of themselves. You have to have the ability for both of them to operate at the same time. So,
well, it was constitutionally the founders. What a lot of people don't understand is, and they need to actually go back and read up on why the arguments happen in the Constitutional Convention and the Federalist Papers, because they're like, we want protection for everybody. Now they were wealthy, most of them, but they're like, but what about the little guy? What about the little states like Delaware that doesn't fucking matter in Rhode Island? Because technically they could have had Virginia, New York, Pennsylvania, and Massachusetts at the time, which had Maine at the time. So 4 states could have ran the entire union, and they're like, nah, that ain't fair.
Yeah. I mean, because like, I mean, and then I think it was Carolina was the other one that was really important as well. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. But here's the thing, like there was at that point a lot of money in Providence, Rhode Island. And there still is. Like people don't know about Providence. Like people have no
Really?
idea.
What industries are in Providence? I'm
Well,
curious.
back then, all the slave ships were fucking came into
Mm.
Providence.
Why Providence and not a few of the other ports?
Because Providence is where the people who own the ships lived. And that
Oh, okay.
northern liquor was made.
Do you know which type of liquor, or
Yeah,
just in
no,
general?
like in general liquor. Like that's where a lot of the northern
Interesting.
liquor was made was in Providence, Rhode Island. Right. I mean, because like that's where the Irish and the people from Eastern Europe lived. Right. I don't want to. I don't want to stand here and say exactly who it was.
I know Roger Sherman. Like I know about the foundation of Rhode
Okay.
Island. I did a little
Let
bit
me
of
let
study,
me
but I
let me
need to
say
read
this.
more.
Let me say this. When Ulysses S. Grant kicked a certain group of people out of the South after the Civil War, um, Lincoln had to go, or during the Civil War, Ulysses S. Grant kicked a certain group of people out of the South, right? And
Okay.
Lincoln had to go to Providence to apologize to these people.
I'm actually curious. All fair, you might have to let me know about this one. I'm actually curious about this one. I didn't know about
It
this
begins
story.
with a J and ends with a W.
I figured that's where you were headed,
Like,
but I'm curious. I'm curious. I want to know about this story because I haven't heard this one.
you
I've heard a
haven't heard
lot.
this?
I've heard
You
this.
haven't heard about this?
No, I haven't heard this one.
Oh, so like in early America, like the largest Jewish individuals were in Providence, Rhode Island.
Yo,
What up?
what? Yo, it literally just kicked me. I'll tell you, they do not like this talk, bro. They don't like this talk.
Yeah, I feel you. Like my OBS keeps saying encoder overloaded, right? Like yeah,
You know, we hear conversations I've had with people where trouble over the phone on Hangouts on Discord. All of a sudden, I have static. It can be perfect, and then I start talking about certain things. No, can't do that. Mm-mm.
yeah. So like I mean, you got to like yo, this is I mean, but anyway, right? Like I mean, like yeah,
Mm.
fucking yeah, there was a large Jewish population in Providence, Rhode Island, right? Just
Okay,
I mean, a lot of people don't know that, and it's still that way today. But believe it or
I
not,
didn't know that.
my little brother lives there, and he works on satellites and shit. Right.
Huh? Hmm.
Like all the like where Brown University?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's based in Providence, Rhode Island.
How
Right.
did Connecticut make its money though? Because I hear a lot of old heads are in Connecticut.
Oh, Connecticut, because Connecticut was basically like that's where a lot of like the farmers lived who, what I mean, were like feeding New York as far as things are concerned, right? Because it's
Oh.
yeah, and then like there was a lot of shipping and textiles and things of that nature there. Right. And I mean, like, yo, if you ever have a chance, to ride into Connecticut, it really is a crazy looking place. Like it's bananas. Like because like you'll go past the WWE building, and then like there's like ancient like 1800 structures, right, and churches and shit there.
Yeah.
It's bananas, like the way the place is fucking set up. But yeah, anyway, let's get back to the joint. All right, that's why participants want the secret history the 2020 election told. Even though it sounds like a paranoid fever dream, a well-funded cabal of powerful people ranging across industries and ideologies working together behind the scenes to influence perceptions, change rules and laws, steer media coverage, and control the flow of information. They were not rigging the election; they were fortifying it, and they believe the public needs to understand the system's fragility in order to ensure democracy in America continues. So let's go to The Architect. Sometime in the fall of 2019, Mike Podhorzer became convinced the election was headed for disaster and determined to protect it. This was not his usual purview. For nearly a quarter century, Podhorzer, senior advisor to the president of the AFL-CIO, the nation's largest union federation, was marshaled with the latest tactics and data to help its favored candidates win elections. Unassuming and professional, he isn't the sort of hair gel political strategy who shows up on cable news. Among Democratic insiders, he's known as the wizard behind.
You know who this guy is?
No clue.
You know who this guy is? Because I found this very important. I don't know if I've heard of him or not.
No, I haven't heard of him. To be honest with you, we're gonna have to dig in and do some research on this dude at some point. Among Democratic insiders, he's known as the wizard behind some of the biggest advances in political technology in recent decades. A group of liberal strategists he brought together in the early 2000s led to the creation of the Analyst Institute, a secretive firm that applies scientific methods to political campaigns. He's also involved in the founding of the Catalyst, a flagship progressive data company. And this is the architect behind this whole fortifying of the election. You there, nigga? Yo.
Yeah.
All right. The endless chatter in Washington about political strategy, Podhorzer believes, has little to do with how change really gets made. My basic take on politics is all pretty obvious if you don't overthink it or swallow the prevailing frameworks whole. He once wrote, after that, he just relentlessly identify your assumptions and challenge them. Podhorzer applies that approach to everything. When he coaches now adult son's little league team in D.C. suburbs, he trained the boys not to swing at most pitches, a tactic that infuriated its parents, but he won the team a series of championships. Right. All right. So like we're talking about Moneyball at this point, right? Trump's election in 2016, credited in part to his unusual strength among the sort of blue-collar white voters who once dominated the AFL-CIO, prompted Podhorzer to question his assumptions about voter behavior. He began circulating a weekly number crunching memos to a small circle of allies and hosting strategy sessions in D.C. But when he began to worry about the election itself, he didn't want to seem paranoid. It was only after months of research that he introduced his concern in his newsletter in October 2019. The usual tools of data, analytics, and polling would not be sufficient in a situation where the president himself was trying to disrupt the election, he wrote. Most of our planning takes us through Election Day, he noted. But we are not prepared for the two most likely outcomes. Trump losing and refusing to concede, and Trump winning in the Electoral College, despite losing the popular vote, by corrupting the vote process in key states. We desperately need to systematically red team this election so we can anticipate and plan for the worst we will know, No. Fortifying.
This is just confirming most of the shit I expected and knew. People are like, what, you don't have any evidence, you don't have any proof. I'm like, bro, I know how these people work.
Yeah. Like, yo, I knew what it was.
I actually speak with government officials and more, law enforcement, mainstream media, different stuff. I actually talk with people. Most people are just in their little bubbles, don't understand how things work.
Well, I know money runs everything.
Yeah.
That's always been my mentality. You know what I mean? It's money over everything, nigga. You know what I mean? In the end of the
practically
day.
the dawn of man.
Yo.
Money, property, cattle, these things, the aristocracy.
Yo, money runs everything. You know? Like, yo, real shit. And so I know if he is fucking with the individual's money who, you know what I mean, legitimately are the people who, you know what I mean, stand here and, you know, actually or are the individuals here who are dealing with this. I knew what they were going to do. Like, I knew the deal already. And, like, I knew all these.
Well, he wasn't supposed to get in.
Like, everybody was like, this is China funding Black Lives Matter and all this nonsense. No, it wasn't. It was U.S. companies who were funding all that shit.
And and I keep saying this to people. There's a distinction between these organizations and the people on the ground, because most of the people on the ground are just people, but these
Yeah.
organizations are the problem. Every time anybody who's revolutionary minded, anybody who's more actively minded, you hear about these activists. They want you to become nonprofits. They want you to go through all these hoops and whatever to do nothing because they want roadblocks in the way of actual progress and change. They don't care. They want the status quo to be intact.
Well, think about it. Think about it like this, right? Like here's a mentality. So, at the Million Man March, right?
Right.
Now there was guys who, what I mean, they were, what I mean, like they were individuals who were in DC at that moment, right? And then there were people who got bussed in, right? And there were people who paid for those buses, right? And then there were people who paid for parking. And then there were people who paid for refreshments. And then there were people who paid for, hamburgers. And there were people who paid for the speakers, right? Like Bill, like, did you know Bill Cosby was the one who paid for the stage and the speakers? When Martin Luther King gave his I Have a Dream speech?
Bill Cosby had the money at the time?
Yep.
I know Bill Cosby got big in the 70s.
No, he got big in the fucking back in the 50s and 60s.
Okay.
You understand what I'm saying? Right?
Yeah.
So like this is kind of the deal, right? So like, there's a big difference between live in Seattle where, you live or wherever, Portland, I forget whatever the one it is, right? And then, there's individuals who live, in Northern California or in Utah or Montana or whatever, who get bussed in, who are people who come in as activists who aren't part of that community.
Oh, yeah. I can personally attest to that nonsense. Even in South Florida, I grew up dealing with that foolishness. And most people are like, oh, there was a problem with the people. No, it wasn't locals, because the locals usually don't act a damn fool. It's the people from the outside that come in that act a damn fool.
Yeah. Like in the Berg, when in my neck of the woods, when they burned down these cop cars or whatever, right? And it was led by some light-skinned dude who just came out of college, right? And nobody knew who he was, right? He's from the Berg. They're like, they was like, he was from the Berg, and I'm like, yo, I don't know this nigga. Home. Like, I don't. Everybody gets to know each other. Yeah. Like, if you're from the block, we know you. Yeah, like you was inside, nigga. Like you wasn't out here playing kickball with us. Like who was you? In the end of the day, that's kind of the deal. Like, I don't know you. Fuck out of here. You wasn't here on the bricks, so we was out here throwing 40s at cop cars. You wasn't in the streets getting it done with us. You wasn't out here piping down broads and helping us run from the jakes when because the child support was owed. You wasn't here for this. Like, yo, when I was moving plates, you wasn't getting it. You wasn't there helping. Nobody knows who you was. You never moved a brick, an ounce, a gram in these streets. Who are you? Like, yo, real shit.
You made me think of Malcolm X, as well as a couple different speeches, as well as certain rappers.
Like, yeah, like you wasn't out at Bellevue Towers. You wasn't in the acres. You don't know the Moons and them. Like, you don't know none of these people. Like, yo, you don't know D Trail. Like, who is you? No, I'm saying. But
then these exact same people who come in, these vultures, they come in and try to dictate and manipulate and and he's like, and people are like, oh, you do. And then those of us who really bought that shit, who actually care about the community, we're still there. You ever notice that?
Yeah.
Like, this is why I always tell people, look at the people who remain, who still bought it 150 days, years upon years upon years, doing the same work. People that come in and make and clout chase. That ain't how this shit works. It's the street shit. It all.
Yeah. Well, no. Like, here's the thing. Here's the thing, right? Like, yo, this was a dude who was brought in from Black Lives Matter, right? He was a guy that he was part of Black Lives Matter up in New York, right? In NYU in Brooklyn, you know what I mean? In the brownstones. And they're like, oh man, fucking, he's like, yeah, I'm from Harrisburg, right? And they're like, oh, we're planning a rally down there. You're going to lead it. You hear that? Da, 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 right? But he ain't been home. You know what I mean? He ain't out here with us. He wasn't on 16th and Kittatinny. You know what I mean? Here doing this. You know what I mean? Like, yo, Yo, you wasn't, you know what I mean? Like, yo, it wasn't pen and popping for you, son. Yo,
You
like I
you ever
was,
hey
go
Tom,
ahead.
you ever deal with them people that come out and say, "Oh, I live here, da da da," and then you start pressing on them because they come at you, right? They talk, they record, they just say all this shit, right? And then you press them, and then you start dropping knowledge on them. All of a sudden, they get silent, and then they don't want to talk to you.
Yeah.
Them the same motherfuckers that'll call the cops on people, and it's like, wait a second, but y'all didn't care about. Okay, here you go. I see y'all motherfuckers.
I see it. I see it. All right, let's keep banging. It's a long article. It turned
Yeah.
out Podhorser wasn't the only one thinking in these terms. He began to hear from others eager to join forces to fight back table. A coalition of resistance organizations that had begun scenario planning around the potential for a contested election, gathering liberal activists at the local and national level into what they called Democracy Defense Coalition. Voting rights and civil rights organizations were raising alarms. A group of former elected officials was researching emergency powers they feared Trump might exploit. Protect Democracy was assembling a bipartisan election crisis task force. It turned out that once you said it out loud, people agreed, Porthauser says, and it started building momentum. He spent months pondering scenarios and talking to experts. It wasn't hard to find liberals who saw Trump as a dangerous dictator, but Porthauser was careful to steer clear of hysteria. What he wanted to know was not how American democracy was dying, but how it might be kept alive. The chief difference between the U.S. and countries that lost their grip on democracy, he concluded, was that America's decentralized election system couldn't be rigged in one fell swoop. That presented an opportunity to shore it up.
This reminds me of House of Cards. If you ever watch House of Cards, there's that one bald dude who's like the advisor and like really secret hand shady dude behind the protagonist. That's who he reminds me of.
Hmm. This dude, I'm trying to think of like who he reminds me of. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I think he's a fall guy. I think you know what he
Yeah,
is. You know what he is. Yo, he's that nigga from Casino who like actually owned the casino.
yeah. They're the brains of the operation.
No, he
They're the
wasn't. Yo, he's not
ones.
shit. He didn't do any of this shit.
Okay, I feel you.
You feel what I'm
Yeah,
saying? Like, yo, he's
yeah.
just a squeaky clean front man. Now, I mean, is what this dude is. He's a guy who, you know what I mean, is above reproach as far as like record is concerned. You know what I mean? But
Right.
like, you know what I mean, he's, you know what I mean, like, yo, if they're not going to mention anybody who's, you know, involved with this, who we're going to go, oh, it makes sense. You know what I mean? On March 3rd, Podhauser drafted a 3-page confidential memo titled Threats to the 2020 Election. Trump has made it clear that this will not be a fair election. He will reject anything but his own re-election as fake and rigged, he wrote. On November 3rd, should the media report otherwise, he will use the right-wing information system to establish his narrative and incite his supporters to protest. The memo laid out 4 categories of challenges: attacks on voters, attacks on election administrators, attacks on Trump's political opponents, and efforts to reverse the results of election. Then COVID-19 erupted at the height of the primary season. Normal methods of voting were no longer safe for voters or mostly elderly volunteers who normally staff polling places. But political disagreements intensified by Trump's crusade against mail-in voting prevented some states from making it easier to vote absentee and for jurisdiction to count those votes in a timely manner. Chaos ensued. Ohio shut down in-person voting for its primary, leading to a minuscule turnout. A poll worker shortage in Milwaukee, where Wisconsin's heavy Democratic black population is concentrated, left just 5 open polling places, down from 182. In New York, vote counting took more than a month.
This doesn't sound like voter suppression. This sounds like 60s shit. If anybody understands how the things work, oh, you got to go over there in the boonies just to be able to vote. That's what that sounds like.
Well, let's keep this all the way 100, right? Fucking like this nonsense of, you know, what I mean, not having enough poll workers is fucking bullshit, right?
Yep.
Like, yo, this is something.
There's barely anybody at local polls. Like, there's like 3 people, bro. What are you talking about?
Usually it's like 3 old ladies, right? But the problem is like
Yeah.
they're not training like younger people to do this, and they're not paying anybody to fucking do it. Is the problem? It's all volunteer work, and nobody got time to do volunteer work on fucking any goddamn day.
Some of these cities, I think they are paying people because that's what I was hearing.
Yo, they should be. And I mean, like, legit, it should just be like a township worker or some shit, and like fucking janitor
Yeah.
or whatever the case might be. You know what I mean? Or like a fucking somebody who operates a plow or whatever the case might be. You know, somebody in the hall, like a secretary or whatever. Like, you know, somebody who can just check people in and do what you got to do. You know what I'm saying? Make sure shit runs the way it's supposed to. Like, but they don't cross train anybody. They don't bring anybody in to,
No.
you know what I mean, redo this. I'll be honest with you. If I wanted to be a poll worker, I don't even know where I would sign up.
Thank you. That's how they. But Tom, that's how they do it. Like they make all areas of entry very difficult in you could say this society if you desire. Like it's like employment, right? Oh well, you got to be experienced. Now certain things I get right, but a certain level of experience for an entry level job makes no sense. Or oh you're overqualified, or you need this, you need this licensing now, or you need that, and it's like, bro, what? I'm just trying to work, bro.
Like, yeah, like, yo, like, it used to be like you went on a job and they're like, oh, man, you're going to be operating a forklift. Don't worry, we'll train you. You know what I mean? Now it's like, oh, man, you got your OSHA
Exactly.
card from fucking your local community college where you took the course in order to be able to fucking, like, what? What the fuck are you talking about?
And
OSHA
it's
card?
like, well, bro, how would I even if I desired to go there, which I don't get into the scam nature on this one, but even if I desired to go, with what fucking money? I can't afford shit.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like some places it's like, okay, let's say a place farther away has the good paying jobs, and you're like, well, you need a car to get there, but then you're like, well, I need fucking money to get the car. So it goes in this endless cycle. And some places are like that. It's like they make it so ridiculous so that people never like, oh, just get a job. Okay. Well, what happens when half of these jobs barely are paying shit, which you detail, and it's like, well, I'm barely need to survive. And so you scrape by, and then a lot of companies were like, we want you to be able to work full time, but then we don't want to pay full time, so we'll give you minuscule hours. And then you're like, fuck. Then you don't have time to go out and apply to all these other ones. And even if you do, you're waiting for months to not hear back from anything? Okay. No, that's cool. That's
Yeah,
cool.
that's what they do. You know what I mean? So, all right. Anyway, suddenly, the potential for a November meltdown was obvious. In his apartment in D.C. suburbs, Paul Hauser began working from his laptop at his kitchen table, holding back-to-back Zoom meetings for hours a day with his networks of contacts across the progressive universe, the labor movement, the institutional left, like Planned Parenthood, Greenpeace, resistance groups, like Indivisible and Move On, progressive data geeks and strategists, representatives of donors and foundations, state-level grassroots organizations, racial justice activists, and others. In April, Podhauser began hosting a weekly 2.5 hour Zoom. It was structured around a series of rapid-fire 5-minute presentations on everything from which ads were working to message to legal strategy, working to message to legal strategy. Which ads were working to messaging to legal strategy. Should have been commas in there, right? The invitation only gathering soon attracted hundreds, creating a rare shared base of knowledge for the fractious progressive movement. At the risk of talking trash about the left, there's not a lot of good information sharing, says Anat Shanker Osorio, a close Podhauser friend whose poll tested messaging guidance shaped the group's approach. There's not a lot of invented here syndrome. It's where people don't consider a good idea if they didn't come up with it. The meetings became a galactic center for constellation of operators across the left who shared overlapping goals but didn't usually work in concert. The group had no name, no leaders, and no hierarchy, but it kept the disparate actors in sync. Pod played a critical behind-the-scenes role in keeping different pieces of the movement infrastructure in communication and aligned, says Maurice Mitchell, national director of the Working Families Party. You have litigation space, the organizing space, the political people, the focus on the W, and the strategies aren't always aligned. He allowed this ecosystem to work together. Protecting the election will require an effort of an unprecedented scale. As 2020 progressed, it stretched to Congress, Silicon Valleys, and the nation's state houses. It drew energy from the summer's racial justice protest, many of whose leaders were a key part of the Liberal Alliance, and eventually it reached across the aisle to the world of Trump-skeptical Republicans appalled by its attacks on democracy. Fucking, yo, it's just...
The biggest thing of this whole thing, when I'm just hearing you say this, the hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars with each of these entities, right? People talk about not having money, not whatever, where that shit could be applied to, but you waste it on protection of your shit. That's how I view it. That's my interpretation of that all of that what you just read. They wasted all this time. People get paid to do this shit. Think about that. To get paid to do nothing.
Well, like, think about it like this, right? What this was, I mean, like them protecting themselves. That's what this was. You know what I mean? Because legitimately, America is like way overdue for a revolution. It's like, yo, just way overdue for a
60
revolution.
years, really.
Nah, like, yo, Thomas Jefferson, he said, like, you know, he said people need a revolution every generation. You know what I mean? Like,
I concur.
I mean, because let's be honest here, right? I mean, this is one of the problems with Jefferson's ideology, or this is one of the problems that like Jefferson came up with the idea of a state as a whole, right? He said, "What right do you have to entrench and enslave the future generations to the laws that you have today?"
That's funny because I came to that same exact conclusion that Jefferson. Like I talk about that. It reminds me of Zach De La Rocha. I remember going back and listening like a couple years ago to Rage Against the Machines album, and I found myself saying the exact same words that he was saying 30 years ago. It's funny how truth is eternal.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Yo, these motherfuckers. Like, I just had my goddamn fucking appeal. I had my appeal fucking rejected from YouTube, sons of bitches. So it's gonna be a fucking week. Anyway, right? So, yo, these fucking bastards. Like, yeah, this is kind of, you know what I mean, where the mentality really gets down to. It's, but that meant, anyway, right? That mental that, you know what I mean, I had just there, that meaning, that general, like, every generation shouldn't be enslaved to, like, the fucking laws of the fucking people who came before them. That's something that we all feel. And especially when we're younger, you know what I mean? Like, why is it that I have to listen to your stupid fucking rules? I didn't sign up for this. You know what I mean?
Tom, most people don't. Most people don't. You know, I know that. You know, the fact that the system runs the way that it does. When you or I talk about freedom, right? We might have come to different ways of conclusions or whatever, and the reasons why we want it. But I believe you and I are some of the truly only people who are true advocates for freedom. Most people aren't. They want freedom for themselves and theirs. That's it. They don't look out for the community, for other people. They really don't. When you don't have freedom for everybody, then the gun will always come your way. You know how this shit
Well,
works.
yeah, the problem is like we understand that freedom has to be matched with responsibility, right? And
Yes.
that's the problem, right? Is that like if you're not responsible for yourself, then you can't be free. In the end of the
Yes.
day, you know, what I mean that's really where that mentality gets down to.
You're a slave.
Yeah,
Period.
I mean freedom without responsibility is just chaos.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
And
that's
without parameters, without rules, then that means anyone can encroach on anybody. So that some people's freedom is more valuable than others. Then that means everybody ain't free. It's very simple.
yeah. I mean, so like you can only have as much freedom as you can be responsible for.
Yeah.
So, like, if you're not responsible for yourself, you're not responsible for your family, you're not responsible for, what I mean, like what you do and your actions and your words, then you're not really free, right? You know what I mean? Because, like, like you don't have the ability to stand damages of your fucking freedom, right? Like, say, like, you want to drink and drive. Well, nigga, you better be, what I mean, responsible for your actions if you hit somebody. You know what I mean? That's how that shit works. Like, yes, I feel like you should have the freedom to be able to drink and drive. But on the same point, I absolutely feel like if you end up damaging something, you should have to pay for it.
That's why children are not held to should be held to the same standards as adults because they don't have not even just the cognitive aspect. Children can't do what adults can do. Period. Simple.
Well, and then that's something else I've always had a problem with as far as children are concerned. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like as a child, even as a child, I felt like, I felt, I mean, like, let me have more responsibility because I want the ability to earn for myself and take care of me because I don't want you to be responsible for me because I want that freedom. That was very simple in my head. You know what I mean?
I agree. I'm talking more like a 5-year-old and 9-year-old, not as you coming up in age.
Like even 12, 13, 14 years old. You know what I mean? I was like,
you're starting to come up. Yeah.
Like, I'm a grown fucking man at this point. Like, And I mean, I was, 5'11", 180 pounds. I'm like, I can work.
Right.
Like, let me go take care of myself. Why do I have to go to school? Like, this is fucking dumb. Like, and I think I proved it. Like, I can go learn more than I would ever learn in a school. And I mean, I'm out here having conversations with people who do have bachelor's and master's degrees in these fucking subjects and running them. I mean, because I went and did the research myself and read the books and did the reading and did the work, because I don't have a problem doing that, because I like being educated. But I don't like, having to fucking, go to a fucking school. I hate the conformity aspect of it.
School's good, and I was just actually having this before we came on with a couple friends, and I was saying high school, like there's a lot of important stuff learned. The problem is most students, the brainwashing, indoctrinating, and programming, they're not taught to actually critically think and actually education, actually how to think. And so, and if you look back historically, this term teenager is a modern phenomenon. It didn't, anthropology,
Yeah.
it didn't exist. So you were starting to help. Now you weren't at the same level, but you were starting to help to be like an adult in pretty much every culture, starting around 12, 13. There wasn't this, forever young shit. It
Well,
just
like,
didn't happen.
the idea of Yagogi or kindergarten today, right? Like it's always been. Like,
Right.
that wasn't just a Greek thing. Like, even the Egyptians at 6, 7 years old would send their males off to go and, like, either you would go to work with his
Tutors.
father, or no, you go to work with his father, or you'd go to work
Okay.
with some, some scribe or whatever the case was, or, some mason, or, an individual who did woodworking or
Oh,
carpenter. Yeah, he would,
apprenticeships.
yeah, apprenticeship
Yeah.
program at 5 or 6 years old,
Yeah.
and start learning that trade at that point.
Or his father would teach him, which was another thing as well.
Yeah,
His
5,
father
6
was a
years old.
carpenter.
Like, because, at 5 years old, like, basically, as human beings as a whole, like, in an evolutionary standpoint, at 5 years old, you're a person. You know what I mean?
Oh,
Like,
definitely.
you're like, at 5 years old, would be the level where you would, really leave away from your mother and start and go and being part of the community and joining friends and finding females and things of this nature. But like, you wouldn't, it wouldn't be like, like, oh, I'm gonna go like have a baby at this point or nothing along these
Right.
type of lines. But you would start to form those social cohesions, which would form a group later on at 5
4,
years old.
5 is where I really start having full blown memories.
Mm-hmm.
Like you might have vague memories before that, but 4 or 5 is when you're able to start articulating, able to start actually doing shit.
Well, 4 or 5
You
is
know?
when like you can pull back to that memory and articulate it yourself today.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So let's keep rocking. All right, securing the vote. The first task was overhauling Americans' bulky election infrastructure. In the middle of a pandemic, for the thousands of local, mostly nonpartisan officials who administer elections, the most urgent need was money. They needed protective equipment like masks, gloves, and hand sanitizer. They needed to pay for postcards telling people they could vote absentee, or in some states to mail ballots to every voter. They needed additional staff and scanners to process ballots. In March, activists appealed to Congress to steer COVID relief money to election administration, led by the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights. More than 150 organizations signed a letter to every member of Congress seeking $2 billion in election funding. It was somewhat right. It was somewhat
$2
successful.
billion, bro. That could have went in my pocket, your pocket, and everybody's pocket. That's your fucking stimulus right there. This is wild. What the
$2 billion.
fuck?
Like, yo, let's break
For
down
no
what $2
reason.
billion is, right?
2
Like,
billion? I don't usually react for billions, but for this, 2 billion? Bro.
So $2 billion is basically, right, trying to think here. It would be 3 times
That's
7.
a sports team.
Well, hang on, wait. It's 3 times 7. That's like $7 for every American. Right? That's $7 for every American in the United States. Right? And they said it was somewhat successful. The CARES Act, passed later that month, contained $400 million in grants to state election administrators, but the next number, it wasn't going to be enough. Private philanthropy stepped into the breach. An assortment of foundations contributed tens of millions in election administrating funding. The Chan Zuckerberg initiative shipped $300 million. It was a failure at the federal level as 2,500 local election officials were forced to apply for philanthropic grants to fill their needs, says Amber McReynolds, a former Denver election official who heads a nonpartisan National Vote at Home Institute. McReynolds' 2-year-old organization became a clearinghouse for a nation struggling to adapt. The Institute gave secretaries of state from both parties technical advice on everything from which vendors to use to how to locate drop boxes. Local officials are the most trusted sources of election information, but few can afford a press secretary, so the Institute distributed communication toolkits and a presentation to Podhauser's group. McReynolds detailed the importance of absentee ballots for shortening lines at polling places and preventing an election crisis. The Institute's works helped 37 states and D.C. bolster mail-in voting, but it wouldn't be worth much if people didn't take advantage. Part of the challenge was logistical. Each state has different rules for when and how ballots should be requested in return. The Voter Participation Center, which in a normal year would have deployed canvases door to door to get out to vote, instead conducted focus groups in April and May to find out what would get people to vote in by mail. In August and September, it sent ballots to 15 million people in key states, 4.6 million of whom returned them. In mailings and digital ads, the group urged people not to wait for Election Day. All the work we have done for 17 years was built for this moment of bringing democracy to people's doorstep, said Tom Lepoc, the center's CEO. Out of the fucking 100 million people, they sent 15 million ballots out.
Why is it that these groups are allowed? And see, this is why people tell me, "Oh, you should just petition. You should the lobby did all of this horseshit, right? Why are federal grants being able to go out to this shit? Nobody wants to deal with these questions. A lot of times that I'll be proposing. I get people to think with this. Why are they even allowed to get federal grants? Why?
Because, you know what I'm saying? Because, the federal government spends our money like it's theirs. Right? Well, they spend money like it's not their money because it's not. You know what I mean?
They complain about being in debt, right?
Yeah.
This stuff like this.
The effort had to overcome heightened skepticism in some communities. Many black voters preferred to exercise their franchise. National Civil Rights Group worked with local organizations to get the word out that it was the best way to ensure one's vote was counted. In Philadelphia, for example, advocates distributed voting safety kits containing masks, hand sanitizers, and informational brochures. We had to get the message out that this is safe, reliable, and you can trust it, said Hannah Fried of All Voting is Local. At the same time, Democratic lawyers battled a historic tide of pre-election litigation. The pandemic intensified parties usually tangling in courts, but the lawyers noticed something as well. Litigation brought by the Trump campaign of a piece with the broader campaign to sow doubt about mail voting was making novel claims and using theories no court has ever accepted, said Wendy Weiser. A voting right experts at the Brenner Center for Justice at NYU, they read more like lawsuits designed to send a message rather than achieve a legal outcome. In the end, nearly half the electorate cast ballots by mail in 2020, practically a revolution in how people vote. About a quarter voted early in person. Only a quarter of voters cast their ballots the traditional way in person on Election Day.
All right. 3 takeaways for me.
Go ahead.
One, for those who know, me being a black person. All right. There's reasons why historically as well as modernly, yes, there are some black people who trust the system, blah, blah, blah. We know this. Here's the thing. It's not the fucking safety hazard or health hazard that most black people. We just don't trust these motherfuckers. We don't trust that a vote will be counted. We don't trust that the shit will. So it's the lack of trust, period.
You don't trust the government. The same way rednecks.
We don't trust these motherfuckers.
Rednecks don't trust the government the same way fucking black people don't trust the government. It's the same shit.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Everybody looks at it black people are like, these niggas ain't coming from our neighborhood, right? We don't know none of these
They
cats.
don't do shit for us, and then when we vote and people say, oh, do this, we don't get back. It's like a lot of these, there's the lack of accountability. You don't prosecute, you don't find from a legal perspective. A lot of these officers, they're not held accountable. but we're supposed to trust it. It's the same thing with these political officials. Just vote for them, but they don't do shit for us. So why the fuck we trust these motherfuckers?
Yeah, welcome to living. You know what I'm saying? In the low rent range of fucking America, right? We're like, you know what I mean? They're like, oh, if you vote for me, you know what I'm saying? I'll protect your job and I'll help you out, or, you know, we'll leave you alone. And then, you know what I mean? All of a sudden new laws get passed and they're like, oh man, you know, your fucking house no longer meets code. We're going to have to throw you out and put a new highway through. It's just, Jesus fucking Christ. None of us like these fucking people, right? Legit, because they're all big city cocksuckers who hate us. Yeah.
People don't realize why people don't trust them. And this is why I say this shit, because people don't because it's this mainstream white America. Oh, you know, just get out there and do it. Just get out. Well, when people aren't getting shit from it, no, you're supposed to keep trusting the system. Why? This is an insane cycle. Like it's like business, right? Let's say you go to a store or McDonald's or wherever, and you get a bad experience. Let's say you like, okay, maybe that's a bad experience. You go there another time and maybe a third time. How many times you gonna keep going to that establishment and you're like, oh, this shit's trash. I'm not supporting this.
I say the same thing. There's a grocery store around here that everybody swears by their meat department, right? You know what I mean? It's this place called Carnes, right? And they're like, oh, they got the best meat in the planet. Every time I go there, I get some type of garbage meat. One time I went there and I bought like stuffed pork chops and they had mold on the inside of them. Right?
Oh, no.
Yeah, right. So like I was like,
all right. Mold on meat?
Oh, I'm not done yet, right? I went there a second time. You know what I'm saying? I went and I bought some fucking steaks. I get these steaks home and they are the stringiest, chewiest piece of shit steaks I've ever had in my whole life. All right. Well, you know, fuck, bad steaks ain't a reason to go, you know, not to go back. You know what I mean? I went back like 2, 3, or 4 years later, whatever, right? And like, because I was in the area and I was a grocery store where I was near at that moment, right? And I went there and I went to get some fucking wings for Super Bowl, right? And this is the year the Niners went, you know what I mean? Because, like, you know, I'm a Niners fan. Like, it is what it is, right? And so, like, I go get some wings for the Super Bowl. Man, listen, they give me these wings, and I start pulling the wings out, and they're fucking slimy to the point where, like, literally you pull them up, and there's slime attached, like dog slobber. Fucking, like, yo, it was fucking disgusting. And I'm like, yo, I'll never go back to that fucking place again. And every time somebody mentions it, I'll talk shit about it.
Down. That gets them shut down, and reasonably so, because you're literally potentially killing somebody.
Yeah, I feel you. You know what I mean? But on the same point, you know what I mean? That's how I feel about the government, because every time I deal with them, it's that type of bullshit. You know what I mean? Like, the first time I had to deal with government, you know what I mean, was school. You know what I mean? And I fucking hated that fucking place, right? Second time was like, I got locked up, and these niggas made me sign my own confession, right? Legitimately, didn't give me a lawyer, went to court, and they go, oh, we got your signed confession right here, or what you did. Right. And then I ended up going into a motherfucking camp, right? Where, like, you know what I mean, they put all these kids together and these niggas is out here breaking people's bones and beating on people all night long. Right. You know what I mean? And I come to find out, you know what I mean, that, like, yo, it was a kids for cash program. You know what I mean? Where, like, judges were taking fucking kickbacks for fucking putting kids in these goddamn placements. And there was a reason why every one of us fucking went to a fucking place, no matter who the fuck it was. So you know what? From then on, think I'm trusting the government ever again?
I mean, I got it bad where I had a public defender paid whatever that didn't represent me. It was pretty. Everybody knew it was a cash grab, and my whole shit would have been innocent if I would have went to trial, right? I remember one time, the last before taking the plea for probation, right?
Yeah.
I show up because they send you court summons, right, for a possession case. I show up. The judge doesn't even know I'm on the docket. Looks at me like I'm retarded. Like, and I go to my attorney. My attorney's like, "Oh, you didn't take the plea? I told you I was trying to go to trial, motherfucker." I'm like, "Oh, okay. I see what this game is. Like, this is what, like, bro. When the prosecutors and DAs all, like, public defenders have lunch together, especially if you're in a small town. But we're supposed to trust this, okay? You have to have you have to have a private attorney.
Yo, when I went through my custody joint, right? You know what I'm saying? And, like, yo, the dude representing my motherfucking wife was, or the fucking broad representing my wife was a publicly appointed attorney, right? And, like, my attorney I had to pay for, and then the person who was overseeing the case, you know what I'm saying, was, like, you know what I mean, another, like, public defender or whatever. He was like a fucking, you know what I mean, he was like a conciliator. And so I, you know what I mean? Like I ended up leaving out of that. Like I ended up flipping the table over. I got pissed off, whatever, because like it was fucking bullshit. Right. Like I was hot. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
he, like the whole time he's staring at my ex-wife's tits. You know what I'm saying? She was a stripper. You know what I mean? And like, you know what I mean? And they're standing here going, why weren't you a better man? And da da da, and all just insulting the fuck out of me. And I'm like, bro, I'll knock you the fuck
Right.
out. Don't talk to me like that. Right. And I leave out of there and I go out into the motherfucking street and shit. You know what I mean? And like 2 days later, I'm walking around and I see this nigga sitting with her fucking attorney having goddamn lunch and shit.
Yep. Yep.
Like, yo, is what it is. And I saw that nigga one more time and I was like, son, you see that motherfucker right there? He said, yeah. I said, nah, I have my kid with me. I was like, that dude right there is the motherfucking reason why the fuck it is that we were split up when you were younger. Go say fucking thank you. You know what I'm saying? Yo, legit. I was so hot. Like, yo, fuck them. Like, yo, and that was the same day that cop was like, I don't pull nobody over. And then like fucking 3 days later, I saw that nigga had somebody pulled over on the side of the road because I called him a fucking parasite in front of my kid and shit. Anyway, I'm gonna keep rocking. All right, bad actors spreading false information is nothing new. For decades, campaigns have grappled with everything from anonymous calls claiming the election has been rescheduled to flyers spreading nasty smears about candidates' families. But Trump's lies and conspiracy theories, the viral force of social media, and the involvement of foreign meddlers, of course, it's the Russians. They're old Ruskies coming to get us. Right, made disinformation on a broader, deeper threat to the 2020 vote. Like, yo, these niggas just blame Russia for everything.
Tom,
like, yo,
these the same people that said Trump stole the election, right?
yo,
And
better
that he should
dead
be
than
impeached
red,
before
nigga.
he ever gets in office. These are the same people, right?
Yo, better dead than red, right? And that's what the fuck it is. Like, yo, like, nigga, this is 1945 now at this point.
If you ain't black, if you don't vote Democrat, you ain't black. Shit like that. That's how they do.
Yo, for all their progressive bullshit, they really do race bait.
They're the racists, bro.
I know.
Historically, they're the motherfucking racists. It's known. Everybody, Malcolm X talked about it. Dr. King, everybody talked about it, bro.
Well, like,
it's
yo,
known how this shit works.
according to people in Brooklyn, the black people don't know how to use the internet, you know?
I could talk about all the racist ass shit. I got call him. Joe Biden is an old racist ass, pedophilic ass, going on senile motherfucker. That's what he is. Known racism.
Laura Quinn, a veteran progressive operator,
Kamala Harris too,
who founded Catalyst, began studying the problem a few years ago. She piloted a nameless secret project which she has never before publicly discussed that tracked disinformation online and tied it to figure out how to combat it. One component was tracking dangerous lies that might otherwise spread unannounced. Researchers then provided information to campaigners or to the media to track down the sources and expose them. The most important takeaway from Quinn's research, however, was that engaging with toxic content only made it worse. When you get attacked, the instinct is to push back and call it out and say, this isn't true, Quinn said. But the more engagement something gets, the more the platform boosts it. The algorithm reads it as, oh, this is popular, people want more of it. The solution, she concluded, was to pressure platforms who enforce their rules both by removing content or accounts that spread disinformation by more aggressively policing it in the first place. The platforms have policies against certain types of malign behavior, but they haven't been enforcing them, she says. Quinn's research gave ammunition to advocates pushing social media platforms to take a harder line. In November 19, Mark Zuckerberg invited 9 civil rights leaders to dinners at his home, where they warned him about the danger of election-related falsehoods that were already spreading unchecked. It took pushing, urging, conversations, brainstorming, all of that to get to a place where we ended up with more rigorous rules and enforcement, says Vinita Gupta, President CEO of the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, who attended the dinner and also met with Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey and others. Gupta has been nominated for an Associate Attorney General by Biden. It was a struggle. But we got to the point where they understood the problem. Was it enough? Probably not. Was it later than we wanted? Yes, but it was really important given the level of official disinformation. They had those rules in place and we were tagging things and taking them down. Like, yo, for fuck's sake. Like, yo, man, like real shit. Like, I don't, and what the fuck, nigga? Like, yo, what is going on? Yo, hold on. Let me look and see what the fuck's going on with Dip. God damn it. Oh, shit. Oh, that'll be mine. Tell you what, folks, we're just going to end that right here for the moment. man, listen, you know what I'm saying? Because Discord screwing up, and I'll be honest with you, you know what I'm saying? I was kind of enjoying that conversation. But if you want more content like this, make sure you sub to this channel. You know what I mean? It is what it is. You know what I mean? Follow me on Odyssey, follow me on Rumble, you know what I'm saying? Follow me on YouTube. You know the deal. I'll be back. Peace be like one. Later.